The shuttle Odyssey's folly broke through the planet's thick atmosphere like a scalpel slicing sinew. Below them, Cortal stretched vast and primeval, an endless wilderness of jagged basalt cliffs, bioluminescent fungi forests, and crimson clouds seething with static. It was beautiful. It was deadly. It was nothing like the brochure. Captain Marla Voss narrowed her eyes as she scanned the terrain. Looks like someone carved hell out of obsidian and forgot to sweep up after. Charming, muttered Dr. Leo Chun, hunched beside her with a neurosensor headset, already running a dozen scans. Radiation's within tolerance. Barely. No signs of urban development, which makes it even weirder. What? That they asked for us? Voss asked. No, that they asked at all. The Gorvas were known throughout the galaxy for two things: ferocity and silence. Apex predators, tribal isolationists, and allergic to diplomacy. They made first contact by disemboweling a Zenthri ambassador mid-handshake. That had been a statement. Now, 5 years later, they requested human assistance. Specifically, childcare. The official transmission had been brief and vaguely threatening. Your kind is strange, soft, yet the cubs trust you. Prove them right, or bleed trying. The shuttle touched down in a clearing marked by stone spires shaped like coiled claws. Voss descended first, flanked by her crew. She stood straight, armed only with a translator band and titanium nerves. A Gorva delegation waited, 7 feet tall, covered in obsidian-hued fur and bone ridges. The creatures looked like nature had crossbred a wolverine with a war crime. Their eyes, however, glassy black, many-lidded, betrayed something unexpected. Worry. One stepped forward, a ceremonial spear slung across his back. You are the human Alpha? I'm Captain Marla Voss. Not sure I call us Alphas. We mostly argue until someone gives up. The translator chirped, and the Gorvith let out a sharp grunt. It might have been laughter. He gestured behind him. From a cave emerged 6 Gorvith cubs, pint-sized nightmares with oversized fangs and uncertain coordination. One promptly tripped over its own feet and began chewing a rock. Voss blinked. They're adorable, said Yar Patel, the team's cultural liaison, who was already sketching in her holographic journal. Adorable, muttered Tuck Reyes, the team's wildcard engineer, as one cub locked eyes with him and growled like a broken chainsaw. That one wants to use my femur as a flute. The elder Gorvith stepped closer. We cannot bring them with us. The great molting begins. Our kind is vulnerable during this time. The cubs must migrate alone. Alone? Voss asked. Guarded. By you. Your species. The ones the young trust. We do not know why. Voss glanced at her crew. Leo looked skeptical. Yara was practically vibrating with curiosity. Tuck had already begun assembling a handheld zapper out of spare parts. Let me get this straight, Voss said. You want us to babysit your miniature murder muppets through an unknown, predator-infested wilderness during your species' equivalent of biological nap time? That is an accurate assessment. She smiled grimly. We'll need supplies, a map, and some kind of reassurance we won't be on the menu. The Gorvith elder grunted. Should any cub come to harm, your bones will honor our ancestors. Great. Looking forward to the bonding experience. Back aboard the shuttle, Voss gathered the crew around the holodable. A map of Cortal glowed with terrain data, most of it marked unknown or extreme threat. Leo leaned over it, frowning. There's volcanic activity near the migration route, and something's interfering with drone recon. Could be magnetic fields or something worse. We'll need to go analog, said Voss. Old-fashioned pathfinding. Tuck grinned. Good. I've been itching to use a sextant I welded out of toaster parts. Yara rolled her eyes affectionately. We'll need more than navigation. These cubs don't understand galactic standard. I'll need to start imprinting language cues immediately. Leo added, and I need to monitor their biology. Their immune systems are still developing. If they're exposed to off-world contaminants, then we don't screw this up, Voss cut in. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. These cubs are more than a favor. This is a test. Of us. Of humanity. Tuck snorted. Kinda wish they'd tested us on, I dunno, cake baking. Yara smiled. They wouldn't trust us with cake. Just children. That silenced the room for a moment. Then Leo, thoughtful as ever, added, You think the trust comes from something deeper? Evolutionary resonance? Cross-species empathy? The cubs saw something in us the adults didn't. No, Voss said. They saw something the adults couldn't. Night fell on Kortal, like ink poured from the stars. The crew made camp beside a cliff-ring plateau. The cubs huddled together under thermal blankets made from emergency foil and shredded tree fiber. One nipped Tuck's ankle. He yelped, then tossed at a bone-like chew toy made from repurposed alloy. Voss kept watch beside a flickering campfire. Yara sat beside her, cradling a cub gently in her lap. I think they're starting to like us. They haven't eaten us yet, Voss replied. That's progress. The cub purred like a chainsaw on idle. Yara smiled. So, she said softly, why do you think they trust us? Voss stared out into the dark. She could hear distant howls, the low tremors of something massive moving underground. The planet was ancient and angry. I think, she said at last, they see what we don't always see in ourselves. That no matter how fragile we look, when it matters, we don't run. We stay. We protect. She glanced down at the sleeping cubs. We adapt. We survive. We fight like hell for the ones who can't. A sudden shriek echoed through the cliffs. The cubs stirred. Tuck was already grabbing a wrench. Leo reached for a scanner. Voss rose, silent, steady. Something out there was hunting. But not everything that hunts wins. Not tonight. Not while humans are on watch. At dawn, Kortal's twin suns clawed their way over the jagged horizon, bleeding orange and violet across the ash-stained sky. The cubs were already awake, rolling over each other in a growling tangle of limbs and too many teeth. Dr. Leochin stared at the biometric scanner in his hand, then at the snarling heap of juvenile death beasts. Their cortisol levels are spiking, not from stress, from excitement. Good morning to you, too, Captain Voss replied, nursing a cup of bitter scent coffee. They've been playing bite tag since 0400. Tuck almost lost a finger. Tuck appeared from behind Shuttle's engine compartment, flexing a gloved hand with freshly reinforced plating. Joke's on them. That was my least favorite finger. A cub promptly charged and face-planted into his leg. He scooped it up like a sack of potatoes. It squealed and licked his helmet with something dangerously close to affection. Yara Patel, kneeling beside a smaller cub humming softly, chimed in, They're beginning to mimic sounds. I recorded one repeating my vocal tone overnight. I think they're trying to communicate. Leo frowned. With what? Growls and spit? Exactly, Yara said, eyes bright. There's structure under chaos. Infants of any species test boundaries through imitation. If they're mimicking us, they see us as part of their social group. Pack, even. Voss folded her arms. Let's just make sure we don't end up lower on the pack hierarchy. The migration began at midday. The route the Gorvith Elder provided was barely more than a string of coordinates overlaid on a topographical nightmare. Volcanic ridges, deep ravines, and fields of fungal spires that hissed when touched. The humans walked in stagger formation, each flanked by two cubs, supposedly for bonding, though it felt more like being shadowed by fuzzy, weaponized toddlers. Why not just carry them? Tuck groaned as he adjusted the hover sled laden with supplies. Because, Leo replied, swatting away a stinging insect the size of a baseball, they need to learn a migration path themselves. It's instinctual for the Gorvith, generational memory imprinting. I was imprinted by cartoons and questionable parenting, Tuck muttered. Worked out fine. Suddenly, one of the cubs yelped, a sharp, warbling cry. Everyone froze. The sound wasn't pain. It was fear. Leo's scanner lit up. There's a pathogen here. Airborne. Localized to the zone. Mild to adults, but the cubs' immune systems haven't fully formed. He turned pale. We need to neutralize it. Fast. Voss acted instantly. Tuck, secure the perimeter. Yara, get the cubs calm. Leo, what do you need? A lab and a miracle. Then improvise one. They set up a makeshift lab inside a hollowed-out fungal trunk, thick with biofilm. Leo worked feverishly, analyzing samples, muttering calculations, and cross-referencing native flora. His hands were steady, but his jaw was clenched tight. These spores act like retroviruses. But there's a protein in the sap of those tree things over there. If we process and aerosolize, it might trigger the cub's dormant antibodies. You mean cure them with space tree snot? Tuck asked, already pulling sap with a turkey baster. Crude, but yes. Yara, rocking a shivering cub in her arms, whispered softly in its ear. A few verses of lullaby. Human, melodic, oddly comforting in the shadow of danger. The cub exhaled a low rumble and stilled. You're good with them, Voss noted. I had for younger siblings, Yara said with a shrug. This is just louder. Within an hour, Leo had rigged a vaporizer from a hydration unit and the heating core of a ration pack. Tuck dubbed it the snot cannon. The treatment worked. Within minutes, the cubs were back to chewing rocks and each other's tails. Voss gave Leo a firm nod. You just saved the next generation of a warrior species. He exhaled. No pressure. Later that evening, they camped on a basalt ledge overlooking a river of glowing minerals. The cubs sprawled around them, full and sleepy, curled up against human forms like oversized, snoring wolves. Hard to believe they're the same species that ripped apart a Trascan gunship with their jaws, Yara whispered, scratching behind one cub's ear. Voss stirred the fire absently. Maybe they are, but they're also vulnerable, curious, capable of trust. Leo looked up, and that's the part the adults don't understand, or forgot. Tuck tossed a stick into the fire, or were never allowed to feel. What if the only reason they're violent is because that's what the galaxy taught them to be? Voss smiled slightly. Then maybe it's time we taught them something different. A low chuff sounded from the edge of the camp. A young cub had broken off from the group and was staring at the humans, specifically at Voss. Its expression was unreadable. She approached slowly, crouched to eye level. The cub padded closer, sniffed. Then it did something no Gorvith was known to do. It leaned forward and nuzzled her. No growl, no threat, just contact. Quiet, trusting. The rest of the crew watched in silence. Leo was the first to speak. They've imprinted on us. Tuck blinked. Is this what fatherhood feels like? Because I'm weirdly okay with it. The cub huffed and promptly sneezed into Voss's face. That night, as the second sun dipped below the horizon and the wind howled like a dying machine, the humans sat in a loose circle, the cubs asleep between them. Yara mused aloud. You know, these predators, for all their strength and fury, they gave us their future. Voss looked at the stars. They didn't give it to us. They entrusted it. That's heavier, and we don't get to fail. Yeah, Tuck added, sipping from a dented canteen. No pressure or anything. Just babysitting the teeth of Armageddon. Leo chuckled. Funny, the galaxy sees us as soft, fragile, weak. They'll learn, Voss said. And far off in the distance, beyond the glow of the fire, something watched. Not a Gorvith, not human, something else. The journey was far from over. The day began with silence. Not peace, but the kind of silence that made your molars ache. Too still, too perfect. Even the cubs, usually a mess of claws and pouncing limbs at dawn, stood alert. Their ears twitched, and their pupils narrowed to slits. Every instinct screamed, something is coming. Captain Voss swept the horizon with her scope. Nothing but scorched stone and glimmering heat distortion. Tuck, elevation readouts? Tuck Reyes didn't look up from the improvised radar dish he'd mounted to the back of his pack. We're dropping into a canyon basin. Narrow walls. No aerial cover. Perfect ambush territory, muttered Dr. Leo Chun, adjusting the biosensor strap to his wrist. And the local wildlife isn't exactly shy. Yara Patel had crouched beside the cubs, who clustered around her like anxious pups. They feel it too. Look at them, tails low, spines bristled. Voss tightened her grip on her rifle. We keep moving. No dawdling, no distractions. We make camp after we clear this canyon. The group moved in double time, boots scraping against black volcanic gravel as they descended. The canyon walls rose like broken tombstones on either side, the air growing thick and static-charged. The sun vanished behind jagged cliffs. And then the buzzing started. At first, it was faint, a soft hum like metal shivering in wind. Then it grew, a low-frequency drone that rattled bones and set teeth on edge. Leo paled. That's not wind. It's wings. Visuals. Voss barked. A shadow crested the canyon rim. Then another. Hundreds, no, thousands of glistening, insectoid forms spilled over the rocks like a living landslide. Six-limbed, armored, and bristling with hooked claws. They moved in terrifying unison. Swarm beasts, Leo whispered. Thought they were extinct. Well, Tuck said, powering up his modified pulse torch. I guess nobody told them. The first wave hit fast. Voss and Tuck formed a rear line, unleashing bursts of plasma and kinetic rounds. The swarm screeched, high-pitched, alien pain, but didn't slow. The canyon walls funneled the insects straight at them, a perfect kill zone turned death trap. Leo slammed an emitter beacon into the rock. It pulsed, sending out disorienting frequencies. A few of the swarm beasts veered off, crashing into the stone, dazed, but not dead. Yara shouted over the chaos. The cubs! They're scattering. Two had bolted and panicked down a narrow side path. A third froze, trembling, too small to understand the threat. I've got them, she yelled, already sprinting after the cubs. Yara, wait! Voss began, but it was too late. A shriek from above. One of the swarm beasts launched off the cliff, wings flaring. Tuck didn't hesitate. He hurled his pulse torch like a spear. It caught the creature midair, detonating in a burst of heat and ozone. The creature fell, hissing as it cracked against the rock. Go! Tuck roared. I'll cover the retreat. Leo dragged the third cub to safety, shielding it with his body as he deployed a mobile barrier shield. Sparks flew as the shield flickered under pressure. Voss planted her feet, heart pounding, eyes burning with fury. She raised her weapon. You want them? She snarled at the swarm. Come through me. Meanwhile, Yara raced through the side passage, leaping over fallen stones and ducking low branches. The cubs had stopped at a crevice, cornered by an advancing beast. It hissed, mandibles clacking. Yara didn't stop. She snatched a flare from her belt and snapped it open, the light blazing white-hot. Back off, she screamed. The insect flinched, momentarily blinded. She swept both cubs into her arms and ran, light held high, burning like a torch of defiance. By the time she returned to the others, the battle was turning. Leo's emitters had synchronized, creating a disruption field that scattered the swarm sonar. Tuck had built a trap using spare batteries in a steel crate. He called it the bug blender. It worked too well. Voss was bloodied, armor dented, standing amid a ring of fallen beasts. The canyon floor smoked. Yara skidded to a halt, breath ragged, cubs still clinging to her. Everyone alive? She gasped. Barely, Tuck said, panting. I may have aged a decade. Leo slumped beside a rock, checking vitals. We lost no cubs. No crew. It's a miracle. Voss didn't speak. She simply nodded and walked forward. One by one, she knelt beside each cub, touching their foreheads gently. They nuzzled back, no longer confused. Not afraid. They understood. They had been protected. That night, the fire burned low. No one spoke much. Even Tuck, usually full of bravado, sat quietly sharpening a blade, his face unusually thoughtful. Leo cleaned his gear with slow, methodical motions, eyes distant. Yara dozed against a rock. One cub curled in her lap. Voss stood watch again, silhouetted against the stars. She spoke without turning. They watched us fight for them. Leo nodded. And they won't forget. You think their kind ever had that? She asked. Someone who didn't run. Someone who stayed. Leo hesitated. If they did, it's been lost to time. Maybe we're giving it back. Behind them, the cubs slept like innocents. No dreams of war. No memories of terror. Just the quiet breath of trust. The crew had been forged in fire, tempered by the impossible. They were still standing. But something else had changed. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a promise. Far beyond the canyon, deep within the mountains, another presence stirred, watching, calculating. The swarm had failed. But the humans, these strange, stubborn creatures, they had not yet seen the worst. And the final trial was coming. By the time they reached the final ridge, even the cubs were quiet. The terrain rose into a jagged plateau, blackened by centuries of volcanic storms. Lightning forked across the horizon, thick and slow, as if the air itself was reluctant to burn again. The path was clear, yet none of them trusted it. Captain Voss crouched near a cluster of mineral spires, scanning the horizon. This is it. The ancestral grounds. The end of the migration. Dr. Leo chin-adjusted the gravimeters and confirmed with a grim nod. The path they take every generation. This is where the adults meet the young, where they decide who lives and who doesn't. Behind them, Yara Patel hugged her knees as one of the cubs clumsily attempted to groom her hair. You mean this is a final test? Voss didn't answer. She didn't need to. They all understood. It wasn't just about surviving the journey. The cubs would be judged. Strength, instinct, readiness, traits that didn't include trust or cooperation, or the strange softness they had developed under human care. Tuck Reyes, limping on a bruised ankle, growled from where he rigged perimeter motion detectors. If the adults don't like what they see, they'll kill them. Correction, Leo muttered. They'll challenge them. If they fail, nature does the rest. Same difference. A deep rumble interrupted their thoughts. Not thunder. Footsteps. Dozens of them. Emerging from the ridge like ghosts carved from obsidian, the adult Gorvith arrived. Taller than tanks, shoulders like siege engines, faces shadowed beneath bone-helmed crests. Their eyes gleamed with ancient, unforgiving memory. The largest among them stepped forward. The prime matron. She looked first at the cubs, then at the humans, and she bared her teeth, not in welcome, in judgment. The ritual began without ceremony. One by one, the cubs were called forward into a circle of stone, facing the prime matron and her sentinels. Their challenges were swift, brutal, instinctual. Dodge, strike, react, endure. The first cub was knocked aside with a flick of a claw. The second held its ground, but hesitated when blood was drawn. A third, once fierce, cowered. The humans watched in tense silence, helpless to interfere. Yara's hands clenched into fists. They're testing them for the wrong things. They've grown, just not in the way the adults value. Leo said softly, then maybe it's time the values change. Voss glanced at him. And how do we explain that the apex predators who've been eating their weak for millennia? Tuck stood. We don't explain. We show them. Before anyone could stop him, he walked forward into the circle, weapons holstered, unarmed. The reaction was instant. Dozens of Gorvith warriors tensed, some growling low. But Tuck raised his hands and knelt beside the cub that had just failed its trial. He held out his arm. The cub hesitated, then leapt, snarling, and latched onto his forearm with bared teeth. The warriors surged forward, only to stop when Tuck laughed. "Attaboy," he said. "That's the bite of a fighter." The cub let go and stood taller, emboldened. Yara stepped into the circle next. She sang the lullaby from their first night, and the smallest cub padded forward, mimicking her tune in a low, warbling hum. Leo followed, activating his hollow projection of their migration route, showing where the cubs had survived plague, storm, and swarm, not with brute force, but resilience, cooperation, and ingenuity. Lastly, Voss walked to the center. She looked up at the prime matron. "No species survives by staying the same," she said. "We didn't teach them weakness. We taught them adaptation. Choice. A future." Silence fell. The matron moved. 1 step. 2. Then she roared, loud enough to split the sky. The warriors tensed again, but did not strike. Instead, they bowed. The cubs rushed forward, howling with triumph. The humans were accepted. That evening, beneath alien stars and the flicker of volcanic lightning, the Gorvith did something unheard of. They feasted with humans. There was no ceremony, no great speeches, Just a quiet clatter of shared meals and the occasional guttural growl of approval. A new kind of ritual. Yara taught one of the cubs how to braid with synth rope. Leo traded medkits for bone samples. Tuck arm wrestled a juvenile warrior and almost won. Voss watched it all from the edge. Alone, the prime matron approached and stood beside her. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was gravel through thunder. They changed because of you. Voss didn't look away from the fire. We just gave them space to become more than teeth and fury. The matron nodded once. Then perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps strength alone is not survival. You'll find we're good at making old beliefs uncomfortable. Voss said. The matron bared her teeth again. But this time it was unmistakably a smile. Later, as the crew prepared to leave, the cubs gathered around them. One by one, they pressed their foreheads to their human mentors. A gesture of bond, of thanks. When the last cub stepped back, the prime matron raised her claw and sliced a shallow line across her palm. She held it out to Voss. Voss did the same. They pressed hands together. Blood mingled. Trust sealed. The crew boarded their shuttle. The cubs watching from below, no longer just pupils, but future leaders, beasts shaped not just by survival, but by choice. As the engines lifted them into the stars, Leo whispered, "Today we discovered why even predators entrust their young to humans." Yara smiled softly. "Because we don't just protect the future. We nurture it." Tuck grinned, "and occasionally teach it how to blow stuff up." Voss looked down at the world beneath them, and beyond that, to the galaxy waiting above. "They gave us their children," she said. "Now the galaxy has no idea what's coming." And with that, they vanished into the stars.